Hi everyone, welcome to Universal Mind Training YouTube channel. Today our episode is on Heart Sutra, which is also known as Mahaprajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra in Sanskrit, I guess. So today our resource person is Anuradha, who is a spiritual practitioner, also an advanced meditator. So today he is going to discuss about how what Heart Sutra is and how can a spiritual practitioner can benefit of this sutra. So, Anuradha.
Yeah, so thanks for inviting me for this podcast. So this is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the second podcast, right?
Yes, yeah, we have done the Sinhala version of the same podcast. You can find the link in the description below.
Yeah, we can also put the link to our blog so that interesting readers can go through all the blog posts and
Yes,
they can
exactly.
get themselves familiarized with our practice and also the concepts and also our philosophy. So I think the main reason for choosing this topic, the Heart Sutra, in this podcast is that we need to bring clarification to the viewers why we use the Heart Sutra and why we use Heart Sutra as a sometimes as a protective chant. Sometimes we use Heart Sutra for to alleviate our suffering, and but like what is the real message that Heart Sutra actually wants to convey, and what is the real message that that we have to learn from the Heart Sutra by diving deeper into the sutra itself. So I think in my opinion, like in Western tradition, the Heart Sutra has become so popular as a regular chant. So if you go to many Zen temples in Western countries, this is one of their integral part, chanting the Heart Sutra. So often they actually chant it, as a kind of a part of their ritual. And in some cases, they try to combine it with some instrumental plays. They also try to like play drums while chanting, so that you can sometimes also combine the vibrations that emanate from the chanting with your meditative energies, so that it can become a protective chant for many meditation practitioners. But is it the real reason why we have this Heart Sutra? So that is what we are going to actually question in this podcast. So like before going into the details, like if you're going to the line by line chant, I think it's like better to discuss the origin of the Heart Sutra, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Heart Sutra comes from Mahayana tradition. So Heart Sutra like is usually also discussed in Tantrayan tradition. So in both of these traditions,
one small clarification, like so as you did describing about these schools of Buddhism, can you give us a brief explanation of like these schools, different schools of Buddhism, and what those paths mean to a practitioner?
yeah. So what these different schools actually mean, right? So
Yeah.
typically people refer to as the early school of Buddhism is what we call the Theravada practice. So the Theravada Buddhism, or the Theravada branch of Buddhism, so that has been like in the practice for centuries, specifically in South Asia and Southeast Asia, and also in some Western countries. So most of the time people consider the early school of Buddhism or the Theravada Buddhism as the purest form of Buddhism. Well, specifically, people from Sri Lanka. But I really do not agree with that. Why? Because the Theravada practice came into the public because of writing this teaching in books, right? So this writing actually took place in Sri Lanka, I think during King Valagamba's time, like in 3rd century BC. I don't remember exactly the timeline. So the Theravada teaching actually came through an oral lineage. So the teaching actually was passed down from master to disciple, but it was like passed down as a verbal communication. So we could also say that it's a kind of a word of mouth tradition. And then this was written down on, well, not on books, but on ola leaf. I think in 3rd century BC. But the thing actually we have forgotten to study is when did the Mahayana teaching actually happen in the history? If you like dive deeper into the history, then you would find that the Mahayana teaching also actually took place in parallel to the Theravada teaching, but in South India. So I don't remember exactly the first Mahayana Sutra that was written, but the first Mahayana Sutra also came into the public at the same time. So while the Theravada Tripitaka is being written in Sri Lanka, the Mahayana first Sutra came into the practice in South India at the same time. So then both of these teachings actually happened simultaneously. And both of these teaching were passed down to different practitioners of different capacities at the same time. So if someone says that based on this findings, if someone says that okay, the Theravada Buddhism is the purest form of Buddhism, well, I do not agree. And in addition to that, if you also compare the base Theravada teachings to the first Mahayana teaching side by side, if you compare them side by side, you would find the same teaching. You would find the same philosophy. So both of these sutras speak about the same the practice that Buddha actually had introduced, nearly 300 years ago before the writing.
Right.
So then we need to first understand that the Theravada teaching, one could, people can have different ideas, different opinions about these teachings, but both Theravada and Mahayana teachings came into the public at the same time, and they were practiced simultaneously by different practitioners of different capacities. So we, just for the sake of saying, we say that Theravada is the Shravaka practice, or the practice that was done by the disciples. The Mahayana practice was being done by the Bodhisattvas. Okay, now coming back to so that is about the origin of these schools. Then when we come back to the content and also the specifics in these practices. So in Theravada tradition, we basically speak about purifying our mind and engage in regular meditation practice based on the Eightfold Noble Path, or Ashtangika Marga. So that's what we
call in Sinhalese.
Call it in Pali, in Sinhalese also. So in the Eightfold Noble Path, there are several stages, and by going through these stages, one can develop mental calmness, equilibrium, equanimity, and they can slowly develop all these mental states, finally to eradicate the fetters in the mind, to purify our mind. And if you look at and also dive deeper into the Mahayana teachings, several Mahayana sutras, they speak about the same thing in the basic practice. But in addition to that, the Mahayana Bodhisattvas are specifically trained to work on the path called, a special path called the Bodhisattva path. So the Bodhisattva path is essentially different to the Theravada Shravaka path. Why? Because the Bodhisattva is actually trained to help others. The Bodhisattva is trained to awaken others. So for an example, Gautam Buddha himself is a Bodhisattva. So the Gautam Buddha had has a lot of experience, training, maturity in samsara, and also he had completed all his paramitas when he entered into the path. So the path of Bodhisattva is actually different to Theravada Shravaka path. And then we have to also mention about the the Tantrayana school. Now, in the West, most people have this misinterpretation that the Tantrayana is, all about sex or the sexual practices that we engage in this tradition. No, it's totally wrong. So it's totally a wrong impression. Why? Because I think this type of idea actually came into the public because of lack of understanding in deep philosophical aspects as well as deep tantric aspects. So the Tantrayana school is mainly about the interwoven nature of this universe. So the interwoven nature means how the things are interdependent and interrelated, so that most of the practitioners who follow the Tantrayana path, they get exposure to many different natural phenomena, like special kind of how do I say? So nature wants to communicate to these practitioners in very specific way. It's like it's almost like an esoteric tradition. So in esoteric traditions, we do not directly speak about the mind training. Instead, we speak about synchronicities. We speak about serendipity. So these type of aspects also exist in Buddhism, but that school is called Tantrayana.
Okay.
However, this information is not readily available for all the people. It's strictly limited within the tantric practitioners, because this esoteric teaching cannot be freely given to everybody. Why? Because you need to have a higher capacity to understand that. Now, for an example, in Tantrian tradition, you would see a picture where a woman is, sitting on the lap of Buddha, right? In Tantrian traditions, we have, these type of different depictions, questionable, controversial depictions.
Yeah.
So, this is one reason that many Theravada practitioners actually don't like Tantrian tradition. Why? Because they have this different depictions that are questionable, and also question the moral ethics of the spiritual tradition. But that is mainly because we are taking the surface value. That is mainly because we are trying to get the surface value of these depictions. But if you know the underlying philosophy, and if you know what actually is meant by a woman actually sitting on the lap of Buddha, then you will start to grasp the real meaning of it. So these type of depictions, sometimes they represent about very critical points in the path, the critical points in the Bodhisattva path, critical milestones in the Bodhisattva path, which we usually do not meet in the Theravada disciple path, Shravaka path. Sometimes these depictions actually, represent the duality of the universe. Sometimes these depictions represent initiations created by the universe for the practitioner. So you can find similar esoteric ideas also in Abrahamic faiths, also in Western spirituality. Right? Okay.
Right.
So to come back to the point, in a nutshell, in Theravada Buddhist tradition, So that is the basic teaching, the basic mind training required for anybody to come to realization, anybody to come to enlightenment. So that is the Theravada tradition includes the instructions coming from a Buddha to the disciple. Mahayana tradition is essentially about the bodhisattva training, and it defines the path or the trajectory of a bodhisattva. It explains about different paramitas, the paramitas we have to fulfill. It explains about 10 bhumis trajectory that a bodhisattva should follow. Bodhisattva should walk upon. And then Santrayana tradition explains about esoteric principles, the interwoven nature of this universe, so that this knowledge is also important and required, apparent for the bodhisattva practitioners. It is not required for Shravaka practitioners. So to summarize, if someone wants to understand Gautama the Buddha, they need to learn about all these three schools. Because Gautama Buddha is the representation of all of these schools. He is not only a depiction of the mind training, he is also a great bodhisattva, great philosopher, and also a great tantric practitioner, in my opinion. We see a clear distinctive difference between the Theravada sutras, the sutras from early Buddhist school, and the Mahayana or the Tantrayana sutras. So the main distinctive difference is that most of the Mahayana and Tantrayana sutras, they are actually ascribed to bodhisattvas. Even our Heart Sutra, right? Even in the Heart Sutra, at the beginning we talk about Lord Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara is a prominent bodhisattva in Buddhist tradition. And so why we ascribe this Heart Sutra to him? Because when Sariputra, one of the foremost disciples of Buddha, when he came to ask about some means to alleviate suffering, or some means to transcend the self, then Buddha mentions that, okay, let's get this let this question answered from Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. So Buddha did not answer that question, but Buddha was actually turning into Lord Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva. Why? Because that is in that point we have to also learn something new about this Bodhisattva practice. The Bodhisattva, the training that the Bodhisattva gets, it's unique training. The Bodhisattva cannot actually live by the teachings find from a book. No. Bodhisattvas do not live by the books. Bodhisattva gets their training from their intuition and from their direct connection to the universe. So that's why the Buddha actually, in this case, in this context, wanted to turn towards Lord Avalokiteshvara, so that Buddha and all his disciples can learn something new about this practice that Lord Avalokiteshvara did. And then the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva went on explaining what he did and how he transcended the self-notion with his own practice, with his own training. Yeah. In the Heart Sutra, the basic chant, we do not actually discuss about this training. But if someone wants to dive deeper into the complete sutra or the Prajnaparamita Sutra, so they can read about it. And in that sutra, Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara and some other Bodhisattvas explain about their understanding of the incomprehensible nature of this universe, and also the training that they had undergone. Right? Okay. Right. So I think we answered most of the questions.
Right. Yeah.
That people get when reading about Mahayana sutras, and also when reading and when they get exposure to many Mahayana sutras and chants. Yes. So we can continue. Yeah.
All right. So before we move on to the contents of the sutra, we'll play it once so that our listeners can also listen to it once.
Bodhi
Right. So we are back, and let's dive into the sutra and its stanzas.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll pin one part of the sutra, the first stanza of the sutra, to the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So, according to this first stanza, and this explains how Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva had realized these notions.
Yeah.
And it says he perceives that all five skandhas are empty and is saved from all suffering and distress. So, Anuradha, can you elaborate on further on this? Like, what does this mean?
Yeah. So, as the name implies, Mahaprajna Paramita. So, the Prajna means wisdom. Paramita is like fulfilled or completely, coming into the fruition of this wisdom aspect in the practice. So, as we mentioned in this Heart Sutra, there were some disciples actually sitting before Buddha and ask how we can alleviate suffering and how we can transcend self-notion. So the Buddha was turning towards Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, and then this description, these lines come. So the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva was practicing the Prajna Paramita deep. Similar to many Buddhist practitioners who are on this path, including Gautam Buddha himself, Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, he also experienced suffering. He was also going through suffering. So then, when we mention about suffering, we need to identify where the suffering emerges in us. So the suffering can be noticed, or suffering can be sensed in our physical body as a physical sensation. But that is bearable. Most of the time, the physical pain, physical suffering, we can bear it in one way or another. Even for a normal person who doesn't know anything about Buddhist practices, we can alleviate suffering, the body sensation. But the main source of the suffering actually stems from the mental sphere, right? The mental suffering is the most the difficult thing to bear. So Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva also was speaking about this mental suffering. Now the next question is where the mental suffering comes from. Now let's say we have a healthy person. This healthy person is fully engaged in daily activities, and he is very strong, very enthusiastic, he is motivated, he has no problem at all. For that kind of person, he would not notice suffering. But the suffering, to experience suffering, we have to be in a situation where the suffering in the mental sphere is stimulated by some external events. So let's say we have someone from a similar background to us. So for an example, for us, suffering can emerge from depression. Suffering can emerge from excessive stress from our work, or sometimes the suffering can stem from some external events, like we are going through a hardship, and at the same time somebody, a loved one in our family, is passing, so we cannot bear all these pains, and eventually we will end up having, let's say, a mental illness or depression, or that kind of situation we can be. And when we are in such a situation, we cannot also control our mental activities. We will lose the stability of ourselves, and then we can even tend to do harmful things, like we can have suicidal thoughts. So we are talking about this type of suffering. So in Buddhist practices, we say that, as we mentioned earlier, this suffering mainly comes because of our attachments or the clinging to the external events. So in the particular example I gave, where we are going through a hardship, and at the same time somebody is passing, a loved one is passing in after him, and then we cannot bear it. Why? Because of our excessive attachment to the situation and also to personal, and well, we are not ready to like detach from the external events. So we always like keep this the things, the emotional attachment, and also the sadness comes from this passing thing in our mind. So it goes on and on as a thought loop, right? So we are always stuck in our consciousness. So then Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, maybe he was in a similar situation. Why? Because whoever has come or stepped into this Buddhist path, eventually they have to go through suffering. You can hear about the same thing from many practitioners. They can be in Theravada tradition, they can be in Mahayana tradition, even in Abrahamic faiths, even in Western spiritual traditions, people go through suffering. For example, if you are a keen spiritual practitioner or meditator, you have to go through dark night of the soul periods. You have to go through several dark night of the souls. So that is one specific state that we have to experience suffering. Why? Because without suffering we won't come to spiritual enlightenment, or we cannot understand the suffering of other people. So the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva was in a similar situation. But then when we are in a similar situation, what we usually do is we put the blame to the outside world objects. Right? Yeah. We are really good at passing responsibility to some other people. But the main teaching of Buddhism is, Buddhism says that nothing from outside world can destroy you except your own mind. If you are perfectly healthy, and if you don't have any other problem in your physical body or mental sphere, then nothing from the outside world can actually affect you. All the problems that we experience can be ascribed to 70% of all the problems can be put into our own mental creation. So then by undergoing a mind training, what we try to overcome is the attachment or the clinging to these external desires or the stimulus that when we see during the suffering period. So that we always keep a distance between whatever happens in the outside world and our awareness, so that the outside world cannot do anything to us. Right. Okay. But remember,
So
I'm telling you, I want to make a remark. Let's say that if someone is under a dark spell, or maybe some occult influence, or let's say some parasite energy, so something, then of course that's a different scenario, because that happens in an unknown dimension, right? So in that case, that person might be needing a help. But here we are, the context we are talking about is how to detach from the external scenarios or the external stimulus which can make you suffer.
Okay. Also, like how we react to the scenarios that
how we react to the situation also includes. Why? Because if we don't know how to react properly, then we make a chain reaction, right? Yeah. So we get some, let's say, some inputs from the senses, 5 senses, and these inputs like create a certain scenario or situation in your mental space. And then if we also getting too much attached to that, then we can even do some harmful things, so that it will go on and on like a chain reaction. Yeah.
Okay. So there's another one thing that I'm curious about, that why is this sutra called Heart Sutra? Does it mean the heart, like the biological heart, or like Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So in the previous question, in the previous answer, we covered about the suffering, where the suffering actually stems from, and the root cause of suffering. So that is the attachment or clinging to external things. But then, what is meant by heart? Why this sutra is called Heart Sutra? Well, now in spiritual traditions, be it Abrahamic or be it Indian spiritual traditions or Buddhist traditions, we talk about we come into this word heart in two different stages. So when we talk about the chakra system, we say that the fourth chakra of our energy system is the heart center. So we often say that the love and compassion emerges from this heart center. And if someone's heart center is activated, we can see these qualities in this person. And these qualities are manifesting as a result of the activation of the heart center. But then, is it the real heart? We also speak about spiritual heart. In all of these traditions, I think the practitioners often speak about spiritual heart, and sometimes even people do experiments to find the location of it. According to some Hindu tradition, spiritual heart is not located in the heart center, but it is coming from higher chakras or the 7 chakras. But then, how this the heart word is related to the Heart Sutra? That is our question. Because in Buddhist practices, we do not describe or give information about the chakra system. Because in Buddhist practices, we often look into the mind training, and we often speak about the suffering, but we do not speak about the energy centers. But I think here in the Heart Sutra, we refer to this as Heart Sutra. Why? Because that is where the wisdom comes from. So in Buddhist traditions, we say that with opening of the heart, the wisdom can also come into the full fruition.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So for an example, now, let's say, we are also spiritual practitioners from Buddhist tradition. I mean, our background is Buddhist, right?
Yeah.
But then we still do this practice while engaging, in all the worldly activities. I mean, we haven't renounced our lifestyle, right? I mean, according to the Buddhist tradition, they say that if somebody understands the true nature of this world, they will immediately renounce all the worldly attachments. So they say that the world exists to us because of our ignorance. Yes. So I think the heart, the real heart in most of the Buddhist practices, they bring this heart concept when the ignorance is declining and when the wisdom comes into its full understanding. When the wisdom comes into its full fruition. So it's the, how do we say? It's the eradication of ignorance. It's being free from ignorance so that the wisdom comes into its full fruition. Yeah. And then, perhaps Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva also came into this understanding later in his life. Right? Because we first do meditation and we try to achieve these, blissful meditative states, meditative samadhis, jhanas, etc., etc. But then the real wisdom of the elusive nature of this existence. The real wisdom is understanding the elusive and elusive nature of this existence, right? So I think that is what we refer to as the true, wisdom.
Okay. All right. So then we'll move on to the next stanza of the sutra.
No, yeah, I think we have to. Yeah, can we go to that the previous one? The picture.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. We could not explain about the 5 skandhas, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So then, when we talk about the suffering, we mentioned that the suffering essentially comes from, attachment or the clinging to external scenarios, external situations. But then, if we dissect this, the attachment, dissect this, the attachment or the clinging further, if we dive deeper into that, we would notice this clinging or the attachment essentially comes from the 5 skandhas or the 5 aggregates. So the 5 aggregates is another concept, preliminary concept that we learn in Buddhist practice. So the 5 aggregates are name, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. So the Rupa is form, sensation,
The feelings, right?
yeah, sorry, form, feelings, perception, impulses, and consciousness.
Consciousness, yeah.
Yeah, those are the 5 aggregates: forms, feelings,
Perceptions.
perception, impulses, perception, impulses, and consciousness. So the first 4, the form, sensation, impulses, and perception, they lead to the creation of the consciousness in us. So how the 5 aggregates give suffering? Because we mentioned earlier that the real suffering actually does not happen in our physical body, but in our mental state. So that is what we refer to as consciousness.
Okay.
Yeah. Consciousness means vijnana, right? Consciousness is our mind.
Yeah.
According to Buddhist practice, and also if you if you are a good meditator and if you have done it for a long time, you clearly understand that the consciousness is a result of 4 aggregates. So what is form? Form is, all the mental pictures that we grasp from the outside objects. Feelings, it's because of the clinging we have towards all these forms, we naturally develop the feelings. And where does the feeling take place? The feelings does not happen here in the mind. Feelings emerges from our heart. Sorrow is felt in heart. Happiness is felt in heart. Anger, well, there are some mental activities and thoughts that usually take place when you contact a mental object. But still, that feeling corresponding to that, it takes place in the heart. So the feelings happen, they take place in the heart. Perception, because of the feeling, we develop the perception in our mental state. The perception gives the notion to the mental object that you see. You have the form, so that is the mental object. When you have the contact from the sensory perception, and then you get the feelings, and then you develop a perception, and then you create the impulses and mental formations. Right? So all these 4 aggregates finally eventually create our consciousness. So then Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva was also suffering from this, regularly running thought loops, mental formations, excessive thoughts, and then he realized that the root cause of this suffering thought loop is nothing but the result of the four aggregates, the dependent nature of the four aggregates.
Right.
So the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva also started to dissect this, and then skillfully, using wisdom, he skillfully looked into this thought process, and then he understood that this consciousness rises mainly because of the four aggregates and then five aggregates, and then using mindfulness he was able to detach from all the five aggregates. So this is what we refer to as the five skandha strain.
Right.
It is because of this dissecting ability that they saw, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva and all the Buddhist practitioners saw the empty nature of the five aggregates. When you are too attached to them, you cannot see the empty nature. You take all these five aggregates as yours.
Yeah.
You are taking it.
Oh, real.
Yeah. You are taking it as something that has happened towards you. Or these five aggregates is all about you. And you are always trying to relate it to me. I sense.
Yeah.
So the detachment means what? You are simply detaching the I sense, the notion of I, me, mine, myself from the five aggregates.
Right.
So that is
the dissolution. Right.
Exactly. So that is essentially seeing the empty nature of the five aggregates.
So, another question that I had, when you talked about this dependent nature of the of five aggregates, like this has does the five aggregates themselves have this dependent nature? It's like form images first, and then comes the what do you call form perception, right? Sorry. Feeling, form, does it go form comes first and then comes feelings? Is it like that, or does it have a dependent nature as well?
Yeah. It is for the sake of analysis that we go through these stages sequentially. It never happens, sequentially, right? Because it happens very fast.
Okay.
You see a mental object and then you have the contact, sensory perception and contact, within a blink of an eye. If you can see this, four stages happen in sequentially, then that is not noticeable for a normal person. I don't think it's even noticeable for an arihant. I think only a person in the capacity of Gautam Buddha, they can see it. But it is just for the sake of analysis and for the sake of understanding that we have this five aggregates division. Right? Then it is wise to ask, then how we are supposed to know the dependent nature of this? Because if you cannot observe all these five aggregates in the blink of an eye, you won't be able to see the dependent nature of it, right?
Right.
But that's why we say in Buddhist practices, if you practice mindfulness rigorously, and if you practice mindfulness, if you engage in this mindfulness practice for a very long time, then you would be able to see the difference between the mental object, the contact towards the mental object, and the creation of feeling. You would be able to slow down this process if you develop your mindfulness. But that is something that can only happen after several years of the practice. We say that we have a saying that if you develop mindfulness for at least for 7 years, it will be guaranteed that you will come to Nibbana, right? We have a saying like that. So then that means that mindfulness is a promising practice. So if someone really develops mindfulness to that extreme level, then they would be able to even see and separate the contact of the mental object from the field. So there's a possibility that they would be able to even see a dependent nature of these five aggregates to a certain extent, but not in full spectrum. The visibility of full spectrum is only possible for a Buddha.
Buddha. Understood. So, shall we move on to the next stanza? Or
Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, I'll just read this out loud. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. That which is form is emptiness. That which is emptiness form. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness.
Yeah.
And all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They do not appear or disappear, are not tainted or pure, do not increase or decrease. So, can you explain what does that mean? Form, emptiness, what are these notions?
Yeah. So another interesting thing about the Mahayana sutras is, as I mentioned, it's not only about the practice that we engage in, but also speaks about the deep philosophical aspects, the philosophical relation to the practice, between the practice and the nature of the universe. So we can see, information related to that here. So we know that the Sariputra is the foremost disciple for Vishnu. So in Theravada tradition, he was only known to be inferior to Gautam Buddha in wisdom aspect. So this conversation is between Sariputra and Gautam the Buddha. So that means the content covered here is meant to exalt Vishnu. So here we say that the form does not differ from emptiness, and the emptiness does not differ from form. Now, how do we understand this? Well, there can be different, this can be explained in different contexts to different people. So now here I am trying to explain it based on my own experience. So let's say you are a spiritual practitioner from Buddhist tradition or Abrahamic tradition or any other tradition or faith. Still you have to deal with the universe, right? So the universe appears to you in many different forms. Even in Hindu tradition, we say that the right way to serve God is to serve, the people around you. To serve poor people, to serve children, to serve unattended people, to serve helpless people, right? So in that sense, these people, they represent the form. And why serving these forms is recommended? Why serving these forms is advised? Because they are the representation of the forms of the universe, of God. So here, the Heart Sutra is also trying to say something similar. All these forms we see in the outside world, be it an enemy of you, be it a friend of you, so be it a monk, they are trying to give a message to you. They are essentially manifestations of the universe. So the universe is the emptiness. The universe represents the emptiness nature. But universe should have a mechanism to speak to you, right?
Yeah.
And then it has to come down as a form. So this is what is actually meant by this statement. Form and emptiness. The form and universe, they are interrelated. You cannot actually separate. So that is what is essentially meant by this stanza, saying that if you surrender to the spiritual path, then the universe will speak to you in many different ways. Emptiness will speak to you in many forms. And also, this, in addition to that, speaks about the interdependent nature between phenomena. Emptiness has a relation to form. You cannot realize Nibbana, you cannot realize emptiness without the form.
Right.
For an example, you will encounter a spiritual guru. This spiritual guru might not be visible to you in the way you expect. So he is the form, but he embodies the qualities of the universe. He embodies the qualities of the emptiness. So whoever walks on any spiritual path, they need to understand the interdependent nature or the interrelation between the emptiness and the form, universe and all other forms. Right?
Right.
Yes.
Also, like, does it explain about the duality, the form and emptiness? Is it a representation of the duality of the nature?
Well, when we talk about duality, well, the duality, often people use duality to explain about the opposite polarities, right? We could say the duality is essentially like opposite polarities like hot and cold, short and tall. These kind of, we can use it in this context. But in some religious traditions, like in Abrahamic faith and even in Hindu tradition, they sometimes relate the duality to relationship between God and man.
Mm-hmm.
So one could say that, okay, this is also kind of an interpretation to duality. Yes, true. But in Buddhist context, in Buddhist context, emptiness essentially means that understanding the interdependent nature. If you understand the interdependent nature of worldly phenomena, then you will not have any clinging to any of these things. And thereby you won't have any suffering emerges from any of these things. Because the resistance gives you suffering, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so why do we resist? Because we don't understand the interdependent nature. Now see, let's say there are few things like, how do I say that? Certain things happening around you, right? And in this situation actually totally depends on many different dependent factors. And then you start to realize that the situation itself cannot do anything to you, but situation is merely a drama created by many dependent factors. You started to see the interdependent nature. And then you also started to understand the empty nature of each aspect in the situation. Then the situation itself cannot do anything to you, and know those factors. Right? Yeah. And then in the last lines of this stanza, then we say that the same is true of feelings, perception, impulses, and consciousness. So that is the base practice of Buddhism. 5 aggregates. So the 5 aggregates start from form, feelings, but starts from form, and then it goes on like feelings, perception, impulses, and consciousness. Now this goes on like a chain.
Mm-hmm.
So you have form, you create a perception out of it, it creates an impulse, and then it generates your consciousness. And then again this cycle goes. If someone sees the interdependent nature or the dependent nature between all these 5 aggregates with the help of mindfulness, then they can be actually free from creating the consciousness. most of the time, due to the outside world objects and outside world phenomena, as I mentioned, we have suffered. One example could be someone is suffering from regular uninterrupted thought loops. So this happens on and on, this runs on and on. So if they can see that, okay, the root cause of this thought loop is essentially the attachment to let's say some external objects or forms and the feelings and perceptions created from the form, then he understood basically the interdependent nature, and he can detach himself from all these mental subjects, mental forms. So that is understanding the empty nature of the five aggregates. So understanding of the empty nature of five aggregates gives you freedom, a lot of freedom. That also means that you transcended the self notion, I-ness, me-ness, myself, from five aggregates. Okay?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then then we come to the next block, saying that all dharmas are marked with emptiness. Now this is an interesting point, because now, see, to explain that, I can mention about the Zen koan. So we say that before starting the Zen practice, when we are ignorant, when we do not know anything at all about the five aggregates, suffering and nothing, mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers.
Okay.
Before practicing Zen, we say that the mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers. So that means the man is ignorant. He doesn't see anything,
right.
Anything interesting in mountains or rivers. They are simply as they are. He doesn't even care about mountains and rivers. But when you are in the middle of Zen practice, mountains are no longer mountains, rivers are no longer rivers. So what does it mean? It means that, when you are in the middle of the practice, well, you try to keep this mindfulness training always. You keep to, keep this mindfulness practice in day-to-day life. You try to see, all these five aggregates, attachment to five aggregates, clinging to five aggregates in all the situations. Then perhaps you won't see mountain as a mountain. you would perhaps see five aggregates in mountain, and you would be contemplating on how you perceive the mountain through the five aggregates. Okay? So that's what happens when you are in the middle of the practice. You always try to analyze, you try to understand what is happening. But when you have become enlightened, what happens? You are no longer interested in five aggregates. You are free from the five aggregates. So an enlightened monk, enlightened Zen practitioner, enlightened Theravada practitioner, he is no longer interested in five aggregates, because he is free, he is liberated. So to him, mountains are again mountains.
Right.
Yeah. So to him, rivers are again rivers. He doesn't care about how he perceives the mountain, because he has become liberated. He has no longer interest in any of these things. The practice. He no longer carries his practice on his shoulder. He is even free from his practice. So that is what is meant by all dharmas are also marked with emptiness.
Yeah. So what does these dharmas mean?
So so now let's say the Buddha Dharma. So the Buddha Dharma, or the spiritual practice. All the spiritual practice are available to us through the universe, nothing else. So these practices come from universe or the emptiness. But then the practice has to be available for us in a perceivable domain. in a way that is perceivable. But if you dive deeper into the practices, all the practices are finally going back to the emptiness. When you become free from your mind, when you are fully liberated, you no longer dwell in your spiritual practice. But for the sake of others, for the sake of Dharma itself, for the sake of practice, for the sake of tradition, for the sake of lineage, we still have to preach it. But the liberated mind doesn't dwell in Dharma any longer. The most important part is the next line. They do not appear or disappear. So what does it mean? So as I mentioned, now when we hear about Buddha Dharma or any other kind of spiritual practice, and if it makes perfectly sense, we say that, wow, that is such a, kind of like a surprise. Okay, I have come to a realization, or I have an epiphany from this hearing or understanding. And then for us, in that particular moment, there's a thing called Dharma, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But if you look at the big picture, once you become a liberated person, then you would understand that there is no such thing as Dharma. Why? Because to the mind, the Dharma becomes, in that particular moment, in the middle of the training, the Dharma is seen as a, a huge thing, right? I mean, that realization, intermediate realization that comes to you, and in addition to that, as I mentioned, the meditative experiences, all these things are fascinating things. But for the liberated mind, for a liberated person, there is nothing to gain. He knows that Dharma is essentially very attribute of the universe. So they don't for him, for a liberated person, the Dharma doesn't appear or disappear. Yeah. For a non-liberated person, there is Dharma, there is Adharma.
Right.
I think the next line has a similar notion. They are not tainted or pure. Now let's assume that someone let's say in Buddhist practice, they are going through this spiritual transformation. So it is inevitable that they will go through a dark night of the soul. So during this dark night of the soul, they have to deal with also the darkness of this world. They have to encounter demons, they have to encounter their inner demons, or 5 poisons. And then these things may appear to them as negative traits or the negative aspects of the practice. But it is also an essentially part of the training. So in Dharma, if you take Dharma as a singular entity, then it's a mixture of pure teaching as well as tainted things.
Mm-hmm.
In this spiritual practice, the spiritual awakening, the practice itself, that is available to us with both of these.
Right. So does this mean that there is no any good or bad in this universe?
Exactly, because the dualistic nature will be transcended at the end of the training. So that is what is essentially meant by this line. Yes. We can also ascribe it into an example like this. So then you will come across a spiritual guru, fully enlightened master, and then when he sees you, he comes to know everything about you, not only this life but also several lifetimes, and then he will be acting towards you in an unacceptable way, but an acceptable way to you. You see it as unacceptable. Why? Because it's because of your ego itself. but still it is dharma, right? Yeah, so
Right.
dharma is manifesting in maybe wrathful form. That is also possible. Yeah, even in tantric tradition, tantric practices or tantric tradition, we speak about these wrathful forms, wrathful deities, but they are not actually coming to like kill us. They are the manifestation of the darker side in us, inner demons, five poisons in us. Yeah. The last line,
Right.
the last line is about the nature of dharma, nature of truth. So you cannot increase truth or decrease. It is freely available through this universe. It will be available to you through a spiritual guru. So emptiness is trying to speak to you in forms.
Right.
Yeah.
It says that there is no any, you can't quantify this, so like there is no any magnitude of these dharmas, right?
Exactly.
Right.
There is no, you cannot quantify it. Exactly.
Right.
So like, this part of this sutra, it essentially explains about the nature of this universe, the interrelation, interdependent nature between the emptiness and form, and also the interdependent nature among these five aggregates. So then this gives a basic understanding to how the universe works and also how we can overcome suffering by using the same principle.
Right. So yeah, we can then move on to the next section of the sutra. I'll read it out loud. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of eyes, and so forth until no realm of mind consciousness.
Yeah.
This is very interesting part of the sutra. So it says that it rejects the notion that we have the eyes and ears, these sensory inputs. So how can one understand this experientially? Because it's not comprehensible, I think.
No, it's not comprehensible. Yeah, exactly. So this is a difficult part. It's an interesting part. At the same time, it's difficult. So the first thing, in emptiness, no form. So when we speak about emptiness in Buddhist context, as I mentioned, it can mean mainly two different things. One is three different things. One is lacking the inherent self. So there is no self notion to anything outside us. Even within us, there is no self notion. So emptiness can also mean that. The second thing is, in a certain meditative state, you can also feel that your personality disappears. Your personality is no longer available within that meditative state. So in Buddhist context, we refer to this as Nirodha Samapatti. Sanya Vedaita Nirodha Samapatti. In English, I think this is the cessation of consciousness. So the cessation of consciousness can also be emptiness. Okay, so there are different interpretations we can give depending on different contexts. The other one is understanding the interdependent nature between all the worldly phenomena. So that can also be emptiness. You understand? Yeah. But in any of these, if you take all these contexts, all these, different interpretations, one thing is common, which is we cannot find any form in emptiness. No feelings, no perception, impulses and consciousness. If you take that, the meditative experience I mentioned, which is referred to as cessation of consciousness or in Nirodha Samapatti, you cannot observe any form. You cannot have any feelings. There won't be any perception due to that, no impulses, and certainly there is no consciousness, and hence the term cessation of consciousness. And if you take the other interpretation, the lacking of inherent self, then whatever that you see in the outside world, problems, even when a person comes to you and scold you, you don't see the self notion in that. Because of this lacking of the self notion, there won't be any feeling or perception, impulses, or even consciousness will not be generating in you. The sorrow or the suffering will not generate in you. So even in that context, this is true. Then let's go to the next line. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No color, no sound. So everything is no in this line.
Yeah.
So what does it mean? It essentially means, I think in my opinion, this specific part is trying to explain the lacking of the self in the practitioner. So the compared to many other religious traditions, the most special thing that we find in Buddhist practices is we say that there is no permanent self, there is no permanent person, there is no individual. In Buddhist practices, we say that the individual rises, individual emerges because of what? The cause and effect principle, or the interdependent nature, or the paticca samuppada, the circle. Without the paticca samuppada, or without the interdependent nature, a person cannot arise. So then the next question comes, okay, then who is becoming enlightened if there is no person?
Yes.
I think the Buddhist practices emphasize this as a quality or the special practice because this has been helpful for Buddha to be free from suffering. I think this was helpful for Buddha to be free from suffering. That's why he incorporated this training. So instead of seeing all the things happening outside us, instead of seeing all the things happening inside us, happening due to me, myself and I, Buddha started to see the interdependent nature between everything. The cause and effect principle. So that's why Buddha said, there is no person, there is no individuality. What is happening is appearing to be, seems to be a cycle that is run by the five senses and the other feelings and other mental factors. So that's why we say there is no eye, but there is vision. No ear, but you hear something. There is an action, but there is no object or sense that actually creates this. Because if you consider the sense exists, then you are creating a person. Then you are creating an individuality. There is only action,
right,
which is happening according to the cause and effect and happening according to the interdependent nature, but there is no person. So if there is no person, then there is no possibility for us to have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body or mind. No color, no sound. Color is a result of what? You see a mental object, and then you perceive it, and then you recognize it using your memory. Instead of seeing that I see the mental object, I perceive it, and then I recognize it using with the help of my memory, Buddha simply cut I notion. Buddha simply purge this self notion from the 5 agreements. So that's why we say in the Heart Sutra that no eyes, no ears, no nose.
Yeah, I've seen this somewhere on the internet that like someone asks like if there is no any like I sense, or like if there is no any self, then who goes to those? How can I be ended up in hell realms? Like how can I go to the hell if there is no any I? Like how can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, but then you have to remember this. You can live by this slogan, but then you cannot do wrong things. I mean, if someone is
that's the
contradiction.
whole purpose of the person who had asked that question. Like if there is no any I, like I can do whatever I want. Like why should I worry?
So you cannot do evil actions. I mean, you have to first refrain from all the evil actions, right? I mean, one could perform evil actions. One could kill animals or people. And one could steal, and one could perform many different evil actions, and at the same time could say that, so coming back to the point, yes, first we have to be disciplined. We cannot engage in evil activities. And then about the practice, I think what happened to Buddhism or any practitioners who are in this path is that they will go through some illusions. When these Buddhist practitioners, when they come to a path, they have to go through some illusions, and sometimes they have to go through dark night of the soul, right? Maybe several dark night of the soul. They will be like they will encounter many demonic forces, some forms that are reflecting our own inner demons, our 5 poisons. So they will encounter many such different beings. But then we should not be agitated because of that. I think in that kind of a situation, this type of a practice actually makes sense. Because like, if you take yourself as a person in that kind of tormenting situation, then you won't be able to handle it. You won't be able to handle it. And then the transcending of the self, the teaching, it becomes so important. Let's say, for an example, when someone is getting to this noble Eightfold Path, then due to the spiritual acceleration, they will go through this dark night of the soul, and they will encounter many such dark beings manipulating and trying to implant different ideas, saying that okay, you will end up in hell, and then you will be perhaps your meditative visions will be corrupted. Your meditative visions can be hijacked by these malevolent beings. So then the practitioner can get confused. In such a situation, this practice is actually coming to help you. Because if you have too much attachment to your I-ness, your I-self, or to your ego, then you won't be able to handle that kind of situation.
Right. Then the next part of this stanza says, no object of mind, no realm of vice, and so forth until no realm of mind consciousness. So, like, what does this mean? That no object of mind. So, like,
no object of mind here means that the object of the mind cannot arise alone. It is arising in your mind, it is created in your mind as a result of five aggregates. So if you understand the interdependent nature between all these things, then you will be free from fear. Let's say, for an example, during the dark night of the soul, in the Buddhist path, this is what I have experienced in my practice, in my evolution. You will encounter a demonic figure. A demonic force will appear to you. And then if you take it as a singular mental object, then you will fear, right? So then if you see a singular mental object in your mind, and then you will have fear. And then you will perhaps screw up your practice. But if you see it as an object that arose due to the five aggregates that arose due to the interdependent nature, then the wisdom will come to you that you will not have any fear. There won't be any hindrance from your mind. Yeah.
So, we can go to the next part of the sutra.
Yeah.
No ignorance and also no extinction of it, and so forth until no old age and death, and also no extinction of them, no suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path, no cognition, also no attainment with nothing to attain.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting part of the sutra. So can you explain what does that mean?
So this can be directly related to that Zen master story. I told you that before practicing Zen, the person is ignorant, right? So he doesn't care about how the mountains are created and why the mountains appear as mountains and why the rivers appear as rivers. He doesn't give a shit about it. So that's the ignorant nature. But then in the middle of the practice, we care about everything. We engage in practice. We slowly analyze everything. We dissect everything. But after the liberation, well, again we don't give a shit, right? That's why we say that the ignorant person and the liberated person share common traits. So for the liberated person, well, now for him the ignorance doesn't exist, right? He is even questioning what the ignorance is. That's why here it says no ignorance, because the liberated person has, he is questioning what the ignorance is altogether. Was there even such thing as ignorance? He's asking.
Right. I think anything that you are learning, you can apply that. Let's say if you are learning.
But we should not forget that when someone is entering to the path, then for that person, ignorance exists. So to that person, we should not say that, hey, there is no such thing as ignorance.
Right.
No. First, we need to understand suffering. Then we need to understand about ignorance. And then we will come to the path.
Right.
Yeah. So that's, this is, that's why this passage is a bit paradoxical. Having these contradictory ideas. But here it is basically expressing the idea of a liberated person. So he is asking, where did the ignorance actually exist? Because he has become a normal person again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is a bit similar to this scenario. Let's say if you are learning differentiation in mathematics, like before learning differentiation, before you get to know about that, you don't worry what differentiation is. Like
No.
you don't care. But when you are learning differentiation, you are like all worried about how does this work, like how can one can differentiate sin x and stuff. And once you are done with it, like you no longer think about it, like you know what it is. I think it's something it's something similar, right?
Yeah, something similar. That's why also in the last line it says, no attainment with nothing to attain. So there was no attainment at all. Person after the liberation becomes a normal person. That's why, now after that he is even questioning where was the suffering. Yeah.
So shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Just, this part says the bodhisattva depends on prajna paramita, and the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. Far apart from every perverted deed, one dwells in nirvana. In the three worlds, all Buddhas depend on prajna paramita and attain anuttara samyak sambodhi.
Yeah. So
Therefore, know that. Yeah. Okay. We can talk about that. Yeah.
I think we briefly explained about this thing in the previous slide. I already mentioned that to the realized mind, to the mind that realizes the interdependent nature of the five aggregates or the phenomenon in universe, there won't be any hindrance to the mind. Then the mind becomes free from the five aggregates clinging. So because now the mind is free from hindrance, the fears cannot exist. Right? And due to this reason, far apart from every perverted view, one dwells in nirvana. Because their mind has become free from the five aggregates, five skandhas, and because the mind now has realized the interdependent nature between these phenomena, their minds are free now, and then these minds do not have any fear. So they live by, they will only live by this pure nirvana without any perverted views. Yeah. So what are the perverted views? So the perverted view is that because of the lacking of understanding of how the five aggregates work, because of the lacking of the understanding of no self, we either become, slave to ideas. We become slave to, certain concepts. We become, we are driven by fear. And then we try to worship, certain ideologies. But if someone understands the five aggregates, he will become free from the fear and all the perverted views. And then they live by the supreme Nibbana. In the three worlds, all Buddhas depend on this prajna paramita. All realized masters from through these Buddhist practices, Buddhist tradition, they will come to understand the lacking of inherent self, the lacking of permanent self, and the interdependent nature of the worldly phenomena, so that their minds are free from all the fears, anxieties, and they attain and dwell in nirvana. So that is what it essentially means. And then we go on saying that therefore know that the prajna paramita, coming to fulfilling this wisdom, one comes to an exalted wisdom state, and therefore they are able to transcend all the fears, And therefore the Heart Sutra, which explains about this practice, is the highest form of mantra. It's a great bright mantra, and it's the utmost mantra, and it is even supreme mantra, which is able to alleviate all suffering, and is true and not false. Yeah. So as we mentioned earlier at the beginning, this mantra can be used as a protective chant, or a chant that can be used to alleviate suffering. And it can be even combined with meditative energies, in addition to the practice that we find in, when diving deeper into the information. Yeah. So this is this is what happens when someone has the mastery over the Buddha's teaching, and they will come to the exalted wisdom which has been fulfilled by the Prajnapada.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the last part of the mantra, sutra, or the mantra. It says, proclaim the Prajnaparamita mantra.
Yeah.
It says, Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhiswaha.
Yeah. So this last part is, it has two meanings. Well, people who use it as a chant or mantra, protective mantra, they actually say the last part louder, so that they can sometimes some people think that they can even repel evil spirits, dark energies or dark entities from our bodies. I don't know, some people believe.
Right.
So, Gate Gate Paragate means repel these forces, energies away from your body. But the true meaning is, I am going to the next shore. I am going to the next side of the river. So what is river? River is samsara. If you are going to the next side of the river, means you are entering the nirvana, renouncing all attachments.
Great.
Yeah.
So, basically, that's what. So we discussed what the contents of the sutra, and what is the underlying meaning of the content of the sutra.
Exactly.
And then what I would like to know is that how would a practitioner can benefit of this mantra by chanting it, and are there any other benefits of this mantra? How can he can utilize this mantra for a practitioner?
Yeah. So in my practice, I have experienced that when we have this chakra activation in our body, we have these energies surrounded by these surrounding these chakras. So these energies, in meditation, we can energize, we can raise the energies, we can raise the vibrations, and at the same time we can chant this sutra, so that we can combine the vibrations coming from chanting with the meditation energies, so that sometimes in some Buddhist practices I heard that they can even shape our aura to a certain shape, so that we can repel dark forces, dark energies and dark entities. I have heard such thing. So there is a great potential of making it as a protective chant in that way.
Right. Thank you so much, Anurad, for your explanations, elaborations on this sutra. It was very insightful. I'm sure, me personally, I could get to know a lot of things about this sutra. Also, I'm sure our listeners will also benefit of this podcast session. So, thanks again, and I wish you a blissful week ahead.
Yeah, thanks, and also we are wishing the viewers also the same. So until the next podcast, let's hope for the best, and yeah, please continue your spiritual practices.